What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us today. I have Kadeem McClean with us, and I have been around, or we've been in the same ecosystem for quite some time, and I've been monitoring his journey and his content journey, and I really appreciate the consistency that you do have. So, I wanted to definitely hop on here and get to know you a little bit better and learn about what you're doing and kind of continue to share that information with the audience. So, please, Kadeem, introduce us to you, who you are, and what you do.
I always struggle with that question, but thank you very much for the welcome. Um, I'm Kadeem McClean, and with whatever that comes with, that's who I am. But um, I guess I could say I'm a coach or aspiring coach. You can call it that. Some people I talk to tell me I've been coaching my whole life, just didn't know it. But I have a business rather in the financial industry. I've been doing for the past almost 10 years. The coaching business just somewhat starting, but I've been coaching again, kind of different areas of my life throughout, whether that was kids at camp or other adults or, peers, whatever the case is. So, me, I'm just a growth advocate. That's how I look at it. And with whatever I know or have experienced or have seen others go through, I aim to help others as well with that knowledge or experience that I've gained.
You said something that I thought was interesting. You said growth advocate, and I can appreciate that. I feel like it's an opportunity for you not to necessarily box yourself in, but to show that you have various interests, but what you learn and are interested in that you're happy to share it with others. So, even just thank you for that particular language and verbiage. I've been on a journey of verbiage and getting ways to label and explain, and that is something that I'm definitely going to take with me in this conversation. But what I'm going to steer towards here is what I have known you for, and that's in the world of finances. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you do with finances and maybe how you got started?
Yeah, so essentially what I do is when you sit with somebody, they're going to charge you for their time, right? You sit with a financial advisor, they're going to charge you 500 bucks, 300 bucks, whatever the case might be. And I know because I know some people who have done the same thing, try to sit with somebody to ask one question, but then they say, okay, that's going to be $500 for my time. It was one question, $500. But what I do is I actually sit with people and I don't charge them for that consultation, right? We go through a budget, we go through whatever your financial goals might be. And then based off of your specific strategy, because I always say to people, it's not a one size fits all. It's not a standard suit, right? A tailored suit fits much better. And that's what I do for people is I give them a tailored solution to whatever goals, desires they have in whatever situation they have, because everyone's situation is different, to help them to accomplish their goals. Whether that's investing, whether that's life insurance, you want to take a look at a different car insurance or mortgage or whatever the case might be. I work with a lot of partners, five major banks over here, and a big insurance and investment companies. So I utilize their resources or their products and solutions, and I take the best of those and offer them to my clients for whatever they need.
I like that. So, let's start with when you said you're tailor making experiences for people, and you also mentioned goals and desires. Even with the work that I do, one of the findings that I see is that a lot of times people don't know what their goals or desires actually are. Could you break down maybe some goals that people could actually look into and put that as a part of their list? Because even myself, when it comes to goals and desires, I'm not sure what's appropriate financially, right? Is it to say, okay, I want $100,000 in the bank, or I want $100,000 invested by the time I'm this particular age? I'm not necessarily sure that we have been educated to the point to where we even know what maybe the goals part has not been defined properly. We can have these desires, but we don't have the goals in order to make the steps necessary to accomplish them.
You said you've been working on verbiage, and I got to applaud you because you said a couple of things there that I definitely appreciate. One of them is the education. So I'm going to answer your question. Don't make me forget. But education, right? One of my main focuses, or my areas of focus, I should say, is I grew up, was raised in Canada, right? Born and raised in Canada, in Mississauga, for anybody who's familiar, right beside Toronto. And I went through the whole school system here, right? Got a degree, college, and What did I learn about personal finances? Just about nothing. Similar with you, I'm sure, Abby, similar with whoever might be listening to this. We don't learn much about personal finance. Now, that's one of the things I help to bridge. I help to bridge that gap by providing the education, because without that education, you may not even know, like you said, what goals might be quote unquote feasible, right? And I'm using that word loosely. But you mentioned, is it appropriate in terms of your goals? And I would say, to be honest, whatever financial goals you set, for the most part, it's appropriate because it's your goal, it's no one else's. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in comparison to anything. There's billionaires on the planet, there's millionaires, there's people who are thousandaires, if you want to call it that. And at the end of the day, we all have 24 hours. So those people making billions of dollars and those people making thousands of dollars, we're all operating on the same 24 hours. It's just they're doing things differently. They have certain systems in place, right? But when it comes to the goals, I go through a list of about maybe 10 goals or so to help jog the memory or get their mind going to say, yeah, that is something I want to do. Or maybe that is something we can look at down the road. Buying a house, right? A major purchase, that might be one of them. Sending your children to school, covering their education funding, that might be another one. Taking care of aging parents, right? There's a list again. It all depends on what you desire. And again, I go through those lists of 10 questions just to get the memory going and to get the brain working, because whatever I have on my sheet, it might not be something that necessarily vibes with you, but at least we start that conversation to get your mind working.
So, not that I want you to go through the 10 right now, but I would like you to mention maybe three of them that many people probably don't have top of mind. So, the three that we think about the most, of course, is the car and the house and things like that. Things that are today worthy. Like, I need a place to live, I need somewhere to drive, and things of that nature. One of the ones that you mentioned that I think, if not exposed to the information, life happens to us. And one of those things is taking care of parents, which has just kind of come up in my life to be like, oh my goodness, this is a thing and it's serious. But what are maybe three to four things that maybe in our day to day lives we don't think that we need to prepare for? And that is in terms of financial planning.
Yeah. So I actually pulled up the list of 10 just to give you some of them here. But one of them that came to mind when you were speaking just now is life after death. And I don't want to get morbid, but we'll talk about that in a second. So just to name a couple more or a few more maybe, pay off credit card debts, because some people they say, "Oh, you know what? It's there. I'm not going to pay it off. I'm going to live with it." That brings us into a conversation about credit, which we can dive into when you're ready. But again, reducing, paying off that mortgage, learn to save and grow money. We talked about it. Retire early and comfortable. That's one thing that people don't plan for, right? Retire early and comfortable. So there's something called your FIN. A lot of us know our SIN number, our social security number, but we don't know our financial independence number. What number do you need to be able to retire and live the life you desire to live a comfortable life? What number do you need at whichever age you decide? How do you figure that out? Say you want to retire, I'm just going to use the generic age, 65 years old. You want to retire at 65. You want to your life expectancy for your family, and again, not to get morbid, we don't know when it's going to happen, but your family normally lives to be, let's say, 95, right? That's 30 years. So if you don't put money away, you don't invest, you don't build assets, where's that money coming from, right? That's again comes back to our fin number. So 30 years is what you need, 30 years of income. How much money do you need monthly, or do you think you're going to need monthly to live that desired lifestyle that you have? If it's $5,000, now you can do the math. 5,000 times 12 times 30. That's the number you need to be able to live your comfortable retirement lifestyle, right? That's your FIN number. And previously, when I was doing this, I'm going to say pre-pandemic and a few years before the pandemic, on average, it was about 1.2 to $2 million, right? Based off everybody that I sat with, that was the number I was seeing regularly. The average person needs 1.2 to $2 million to be able to retire comfortably in that range, right? 65 to 90 or 95 years old. Which 60 to 65-year-old do you know that has that amount of money put away and has their mortgage paid off? It's not very often that you see that, right? To go into one more, something that we don't often think about. A lot of us feel like the S on our chest has not faded, right? We feel like we're still young, we're still invincible, and honestly, we've never been invincible, but we think we're young, we're invincible, and nothing can harm us. We're gonna live to be a ripe old age of 120 years old. And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but in this past year alone, I couldn't tell you how many people in my family have passed away, right? Similarly, some of you might be able to resonate with that, right? Whether it's you or somebody you know who had someone close to them pass away. It happens. Life happens. Again, we don't know when that clock will hit zero. We need to prepare for that because what happens when somebody passes away? There needs to be a funeral. Who's paying for the funeral? Funerals are not cheap, right? There needs to be a transfer of wealth if that's something you care about. Are you going to leave your family with something that allows them to sustain their lifestyle financially? Or are you going to put them into a hole? Because you think if you don't have life insurance, that you're just not leaving anything for them. But in fact, you are leaving them something. You're leaving them your debts. Your debts don't disappear. Your taxes that you owed or are going to owe for that year you worked don't disappear. Those all stay there, right? And I'll say this, life insurance is, I like the way this it was described. It was, we describe it as your last love letter to your family, right? To your loved ones. Because a life insurance plan, a good life insurance plan, because not all plans are made the same. That's why I mentioned the whole tailored versus standard. A good life insurance plan can do for your family what you were doing financially when you were alive, even when you're long dead and gone, right? So I won't harp too much on that one, but those are some of the points or goals that people don't really keep in mind is have life insurance or be able to take care of my family when I'm gone, you know? Because there are so many situations where somebody passes away, either the spouse or whatever the case might be, and it completely changes the, of course you're hit emotionally, but having to deal with that financial piece, and I'm speaking from experience, it's not easy. It adds so much more to the burden. So if you can at least take away a piece of that burden for your loved ones, I believe you have a responsibility to do so.
And you said so many key things there. When it comes down to it, I think one of the areas that this was not explained to us a lot was that key element that you were talking about with the fin being able to kind of say, hey, if I want to retire early and comfortably, here is how I want to live a different portion of my life where I'm not reporting to work or I'm not necessarily super hands on in my particular business if you're a business owner. And then being able to allocate funds for those remaining years. I think literally that's only come to my mind, to my understanding in the past couple of years to be like, oh, I need to put money away for when I can't or when I'm not working. So, with all that being said, I would like to kind of shift a little bit into budgeting. So, now that we've talked about being prepared or finding a way to prepare yourself, be it in life insurance to take care of your family should you pass away. Being able to, we can talk a little bit about it later with some of the ways that we can diversify to have that particular income if it's not traditional savings or high yield savings accounts or stocks, but different ways that we can put pockets of money away to help us in those years where we don't want to work or we want to play or whatnot. But what I would like to talk about is present day budgeting basics, because I can say that this is something that I struggle with to date. Like, I know I can put money away, but I can't say for certain how much money I'm spending. I can't say for sure outside of what I've, allocated for investments to go ahead and just do an automatic transfer from day to day or month to month. what are the basics of budgeting that we need to do? Having this in mind that will help prepare us not only for today, but also help prepare us to reach that fin number a little bit quicker.
Yeah, right. Great question. The number one basic thing about budgeting is doing a budget, plain and simple. Because not many people, unfortunately, actually do a budget. They think it's so elementary, right? But one of the things I often talk about is what kind of computer are you using right now? It's an Apple, right? Okay. Do you think Apple does annually, quarterly reviews of their finances? Absolutely, right? I'm using an Asus ZenBook right now. Asus, they do the same thing. They're a big company in the tech world. I have a Google phone. Google does the same thing, right? Honda, whatever car you drive, they do the same thing. So if these giant corporations are doing quarterly or annually reviews, don't you think that we should look at our finances pretty regularly as well? Absolutely, right? And this isn't necessarily, of course, towards you, Abby. This is for whoever's listening, but we need to make sure we stay on top of it. I've heard someone say it this one. I think it was Rob Wilson. Spend time with your money, right? We need to spend time with our money. And at the very least, I would personally say at the very, very least, a quarter. Every quarter, do a budget. But honestly, we should probably be doing one every month, right? That'll again allow you to keep track of what's going out and what's coming in. And you know what's funny about that to go back to it. Um, it's been a long time coming. So there goes my battery. It's been a long time coming, but I'm reading the Millionaire Next Door, right? And one of the things that they talk about there is some studies that they did of wealthy people, millionaires, and how to categorize a millionaire. By the way, it's not income; it's net worth. We can talk about that another time. But one of the main things that he talks about is the millionaires that they've studied. There's a group who they're millionaires, let's say because of their income status is they make over $1 million. But there's the net worth portion. Those who have over $1 million in net worth, they focus and make it a point to do a budget, to keep track of their finances, to be frugal, right? They're still thrifters, right? They go thrift shopping. So knowing your budget, I mentioned that point because it's vital. It's important. If you don't know your budget, can you really become financially independent? No, right? Another piece to it, sorry, about your budget rather. I mentioned do a budget and do it regularly and stay on top of it, but also stick to it as much as you can, right? You got to stick to your budget. What's the point of writing these things on paper and having an idea to say, okay, I'm going to spend this much here, and this much over here if we're not actually sticking to it? We're deviating from the plan. If you're playing a sport, football, let's say, and the coach draws up a play and you are out of position, you threw off the whole team. The ball's not going to get to where it needs to get to. So you got to make sure you put your dollars in position, right? And keep them in position. One thing you said, Abby, again, that I loved was automation. Automation helps you to stay on top of your budget. If you know you're going to put away $200 a month for investing, put away $200 a month for investing, automate it. You don't have to think about it. It just comes out automatically, right? So hopefully that answers your question in terms of some tips or strategies on how to budget. Because okay, I'll say this as well. There's so many different strategies out there that you can utilize, right? 80-20, 80-10-10, 50-30-20. There's a whole bunch of budgeting strategies. I don't necessarily want to dive too deep into any of them specifically because it depends on you, right? Everyone's different. Pick one though and stick to it. Stick to it for at least 3 months and see how much it helps you. If it doesn't help you and it doesn't work for you, then switch things up. However, as a default, I would say make sure and do everything you can to put away at least 10% of every dollar you earn for investments.
Now, with that being said, we know there are a lot of thoughts and rules and things of that nature. Um, what is the order for you? So, with that being said, with the 10% of your income towards investments, is this after paying off debts or this is while you're paying off debts? What are your thoughts on that?
I appreciate the question. I won't answer it. I'll use Warren Buffett to answer it, right? Pay yourself first. That's what he says. Pay yourself first because the bills are going to be there. Make sure you're covering your bills. Make sure you're covering at least the minimum on all of your outstanding debts in terms of your credit cards or your loans, because that affects your credit score. But pay yourself first. And the reason we say pay yourself first is because after we pay all of our bills, there's something called lifestyle. Forgive me. There's something called lifestyle that we normally go ahead and spend on, right? And for some reason, somehow we always find money to spend on lifestyle. Even if we don't have it, we find it. We go out to the, for a night out, we go buy a new phone, new clothes, whatever it might be. We go spend on lifestyle. So instead of doing that, pay yourself first. Because we know once you pay yourself first at 10%, there will be money for the bills. It's the lifestyle, if anything, that's going to have to quote unquote suffer, right? I don't even want to use that word because, of course, the negative connotations around it, but you're going to have to make adjustments, right? How bad do you want this goal that you put in place versus how bad do you want to, continue living this lifestyle exactly the same way you've been living it, right? Taxes, we can't do anything about. That comes out first, but then pay yourself.
Yeah, and that's key. I think sometimes when it comes to budgeting and finances, people either get too overwhelmed with it or they feel like it's too restrictive. And, you get the YOLO, you only live once type speech in there. It's like, well, I'm going to enjoy myself now because anything can happen tomorrow. But it is in finding, like, literally setting expectations when it comes down to it. If you like to quote unquote have fun and spend money and go on trips and things of that nature, I believe that you're saying you can budget for it. Nobody's saying don't budget for it, but you have to plan your fun. You have to your future. You have to plan to pay your rent, please, and thank you. But if it's important to you, finding a way to finance it is something that can be done and dictated by you. I think even when it comes to this budgeting thing, everything is tailor made. If I, really like a certain food or something like that, I can say, okay, up to this point, I can go out and spend on this particular food or this experience here and there. But it gives me a boundary or a barrier to say, don't blow all your money on this particular thing, which is some of the discipline that some of us lack. But so how have you been able to maintain your discipline? And sorry, go ahead, finish your thought.
Sorry. In respects to the holiday season, I'll give one more budgeting um piece, I guess. One of my friends' clients asked me the other day. They said they don't have money per se, but they want to budget and save for Christmas gifts. How they're saying how can they afford Christmas gifts for their niece or their nephew or whoever it may have been. I said, okay, well, how much does a gift cost? They said they don't know. They don't know what they're gonna get. Okay, great. How much do you want to spend on these gifts? They told me a number. Say it was, say it was five, right? Or sorry, 50. So $50. Great. How many paychecks do you have left before that time? Let's say it's five paychecks. Okay. You need to save $10 per paycheck to be able to afford that $50 gift, right? So whatever the numbers might be for you, you can apply that same strategy when it comes to budgeting and being able to afford the gifts that you want to afford. And if you didn't start, or if you started earlier, rather, let's say you're super disciplined, you started January saving for your Christmas gifts, then even less you can put away every month, right? Because you're starting earlier, you have more paychecks, but you're still putting away $5, let's say, per paycheck, or $10, whatever the case might be, so that you can afford all of those Christmas gifts or holiday gifts without worrying necessarily about where's the money coming from because you already put it aside instead of wasting it earlier in the year. Sorry, your question one more time.
No, I think you answered it within it. One of the things that my business coach actually said to me, and it like a light bulb. Sometimes it is conversations that we hear and interact with people that help us be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So for instance, because I'm a full-time entrepreneur now, I have things like insurance, and because I live abroad, like I go home, about once a year if I need to. But there's certain major expenses that come across, and I'm just like, ugh, what am I going to do about, having to pay this two, three, $4,000 at one time. And he's like, we'll just, allocate it, like budget it in. You pay yourself that much, or you put that money aside every month so that you're not, scrambling when it's time to pay it all. You've put that aside every month. And just being told to do that was just like all I have to do is put $350 aside a month, and I can afford, or whatever the allocation is. It's like, I'm putting money aside for my flight. I'm putting money aside for my insurance. I'm putting money aside for X, Y, and Z. So almost like making your goals almost like a bill, if you will. And just, and even when it comes to running a business and learning how to pay myself, um, and learning like business money is business money, and I pay myself a certain salary, that has been key. Thank you so much for sharing what you shared thus far. I'd love for us, as we land the plane and wrap up today's session, for you to share maybe 2 or 3 resources that people can utilize that can help them at least get started with budgeting and planning for the future.
Yeah, perfect. No problem. Again, there's so many different resources you can find online. You can type in Google. Like, there's free resources everywhere. Don't pay for a lot of these. Some of them you will have to pay, of course, and you should pay for some. But like a budget sheet, you don't have to pay for a budget sheet. In fact, maybe I'll give you a link to one of my budget sheets that they can go ahead and download. Drop it in the description somewhere. Um, there's again books that you can pick up. Right, I just mentioned I'm still reading. Right, not that I think I'm up here or anything like that. My point is we need to stay on top of our knowledge, our education. So yes, pick up books, attend seminars if you want to, talk to a financial professional. I just told you I don't charge necessarily for those conversations, right? And I do actually have a book that you can go ahead and pre-order called The Wings of Abundance, right? This is coming out November 19th, but you can go ahead and pre-order it. I can again share that link. This talks about finances from the perspective of, I'll say this. I use my mother's situation as a single mother, growing 6 children on her own, of course. And I looked at the financial situations that she had to endure, as well as some other family members and whatnot, and different people growing up. And I said, okay, what are the missing pieces of information that if they had during these situations could have helped them to change their life? So some of those things are what I put in this book. It's a resource that you can go ahead and utilize, right? Um, there's again ebooks that you can utilize. Like there's YouTube videos. There's a bunch of different resources you can go and find online or speak to somebody, because if you feel like you know it all, but you're taking action on none of it, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? And unfortunately, that's going to be some of the people listening to this. They're going to listen. They're going to be like, oh, I know that already. Oh, I know this already. Great. How long have you been doing it? Because if you haven't tried it and stuck to it for a certain amount of time, then it's not going to work for you. So you can sit there and say you know it, but are you utilizing it? Because wealthy people have utilized every strategy we've talked about, and they stuck to it, and it helped them get to where they are, and it helps them to maintain and sustain themselves where they are, right? So those are some of the resources, right? Again, books, YouTube videos, seminars, sitting down with somebody like myself to get that information, because I can talk on here all I want, let's say, or go on my social media pages and speak all I want. But if you don't sit down with somebody or have a one-on-one conversation, then you're not going to be able to utilize a tailored fit suit, like we said earlier, right? And one last thing I'll say, sorry to that, social media. Okay. Listen, Abby, the only reason I'm on social media personally is because of business. I'm going to be straight up and honest. I'm an introvert. I do not like social media. However, it is a great resource that I understand, right? Depending on how you use it. Because a lot of people are going on there and watching certain videos that are, let's say, questionable. I'll leave it at that. You're going on there, you're watching videos, and you're using up a bunch of your time instead of going on there to get information like this, right? Instead of going on there to get information that you want to learn about finances or whatever the case is. And mind you, fact check some of these things, but that's another resource you can utilize. Stop going on there just to watch entertainment or get entertainment. Go on there and get some information for yourself. So hopefully that answers your question there, Abby.
Those were wonderful points, and I appreciate them. So I'm going to have you share in a moment. So if you all are listening or watching, we see here. I'm not sure if you work with people from all over, if you're just strictly Canada, or if you're talking with people in the U.S. or abroad like me. But either way, I'll share your information in the description for the book, the consultation, if you're fine with that, any of the downloads, and as well your social media. So before we sign off, could you tell them where they can find you on the social media that you use for business purposes so that they can get more information?
Definitely. So first of all, personally, Canada. However, that's in terms of who I service. But I do have people in other, in the U.S. that can communicate with you and help you out in that manner because they understand the way the U.S. system operates more than I do. So I don't want to do you a disservice. I would connect you with them. The budgeting sheet doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can utilize that resource. The book, it's specifically going to be shipping to start at least Canada, US, and the UK, right? Where you can find me on social media or YouTube or wherever, Kadeem McClean, pretty much across all platforms, if not Kadeem McClean 27. And the podcast that I have where I do talk finance, personal development, and entrepreneurship is the Success Spectrum podcast.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I've been checking it out. You share wonderful information. You all should too. Kadeem, thank you for your time today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.